There we go. All right, and admit all and disable the waiting room. There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes to arrive and get settled, get set up and connected to audio. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Make sure that the waiting room is turned off. There we go. Great. So it seems like most people have joined us from the waiting room. All right. And why don't we get started? So thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Draker, and I am the program manager for Working Culture. I'm also the fund administrator for the second round of the Catalyst and Transformation Fund, or CAT, as it's also known. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Karen Ennis, who was the previous fund administrator for the first CAT fund round, as well as my colleagues, Naomi Stokes and Brian D'Angelo, who are going to be helping us out with tech support today. So just a few housekeeping items. There is a Zoom captions available for folks who would like to follow along there. The first part of this session is also going to be recorded as I go over the program details, and then we'll open things up to a Q&A period, which will not be recorded. Just because some folks may have some very sensitive questions to bring up during that point. So we'll just record the first part of the program details and make that available on our website. So with that in mind, we'll ask you to please save any questions to the end. But if something does come to mind as I'm going through the slides, you're welcome to enter your question into the chat for us to address later. And just another note about questions being asked, because we're together for only a short time, we're going to ask that you keep your questions broad and ideally focused on any clarification about the program guidelines and the any other information that's available on the program page. If you do have additional questions around your organization's eligibility, or perhaps about the type of project proposal that you're wishing to put through, you can contact me at stephanie.draker@workingculture.ca after this session if you do require further clarification. Just a note about this, as you can imagine, we've had a lot of interest in the CAT Fund, particularly because it has also been opened up to the rest of Ontario. So we're going to be trying our best to get back to as many people as possible. Yes, if you do have questions that aren't answered by today's info session or by the guidelines available online, you can try to get in touch with us, and either you'll hear back from myself or from my colleague Karen, who's also on the call. So a little bit more about Working Culture for those who may not be familiar with us. We are a Ontario-based nonprofit art service organization focused on supporting the career development of people who work in the arts. And we work in support of all disciplines and creative practices for both artists and arts managers alike, organizations as well, and for both people who work in the arts sector as well as people who hold creative jobs in other sectors. Most people know us for our popular job board as well as our programming, but we also conduct workforce research and create and host other career resources, which are available on our website, and of course administer funds like the CAT Fund. And we do a great deal of this work in partnership with organizations right across Ontario and in many different regions. The Catalyst and Transformation Fund is a fairly new initiative for Working Culture. It was actually born out of the pandemic during a time when there was quite immediate need to explore and address the significant challenges to the way that at the time Toronto-based arts organizations, associations, and businesses were operating. It has since evolved and is now open to Ontario-based arts organizations and artist collectives to investigate, plan, and implement substantive change in their operations and the way they work. Advisory support and funding for this round of CAT has been generously provided by Canada Council for the Arts, Ontario Arts Council, City of Toronto, Metcalfe Foundation, and the Israeli Foundation, with additional advisory support provided by the Toronto Arts Council. It's actually quite a historic and much needed collaboration by this group of funders. This program is designed to fund projects that fall within two distinct phases of organizational change. So the first one is exploration projects. So those are grants of up to $15,000 for organizations who are looking to explore new directions or possibilities for their organizations to transform. And then there's also implementation projects, which are grants of up to $25,000, again, for organizations and collectives to implement change within the organization. So either building on an exploration project that they're applying for through the CAT Fund, or on other previously piloted project activities. You can apply for either phase or both the exploration and implementation for up to $40,000 combined, if that is applicable to your project idea. However, for applicants that apply to both exploration and implementation, we just want to stress that there has to be a direct correlation between what you're saying you're going to be doing through the exploration phase and what you're looking to do through the implementation project being proposed. There also must be a clear budget breakdown for both phases that align with the amounts being offered, obviously. And a note that the implementation funds will only be allocated upon successful completion and submission of a report of the exploration project. So something very important to keep in mind. The previous iteration of this program was originally only open to Toronto-based organizations. However, as I mentioned earlier, we're very pleased that this round is now open to Ontario-based incorporated nonprofit arts and art service organizations, as well as artist collectives operating on a nonprofit basis that have been in operation for more than 3 years and have total revenues of $5 million or under. And just to further clarify, when we say an artist collective, that's defined as 2 or more artists that are working together under one group, either on an ongoing project or an ongoing basis. And for collectives of 2 artists, they must be Ontario residents. For collectives of more than 2 artists, the majority of members involved in the project must be Ontario residents. Those details are also reiterated in the guidelines. Previous CAT Fund recipients can apply to this round of the CAT Fund. However, priority will be given to organizations that have not previously received support from the CAT Fund. And if previous CAT applicants are applying, they must be applying for new and distinct phases of work or initiatives through this round. Now, in terms of the project criteria, anybody who's applying to the CAT Fund must select one of the following project themes for their submission. So the first one is making shifts to new business models and organizational structures. So for instance, that could be investigating and implementing new revenue generating models, like diversifying methods of generating funds. It could also be exploring or implementing the way that your organization is registered or incorporated. For instance, in the past, we've had other CAT applicants apply for and implement charitable status for the organization. So that would fall under that category. Then there's forming strategic partnerships with other organizations. So that can be from both inside or outside of the sector in order to transform the way that you work together over the long term. So that's the operative term here. It's over the long term, not as a one-off project. So for example, that could be, coming together under a strategic partnership to maximize sharing resources. And resources could be, actual materials, it could be staff on an ongoing basis. And looking at different models for how that might work. It could be, developing or implementing new models for shared space for both your administrative or, potentially programming purposes, for instance, and other things along those lines. The third theme is developing and or implementing strategies and engaging expertise to transform capacity and or explore new directions. That is a mouthful. And what we mean by that is this is an area where if there is a need to explore or address a significant transformation of, say, your activities or what you do to support your mission, for example, exploring and addressing mission shift in order to remain relevant in or to the community you serve, that could fall under this category. Or it could also be, looking at possibly other major restructuring ideas. So, for instance, you may be trying to find a more efficient way of operating in the short term for longer term impact. And one example that could fall under this is, perhaps an assessment of organizational capacity or right sizing, or restructuring the organization to meet either new or maybe more realistic objectives and increase efficiency in the way that you work. And then the final theme, and this one I think is probably one of the more straightforward ones, is addressing organizational life cycle questions. So this could include succession planning and implementation. It could include exploring or implementing new leadership structures, for example, co-leadership or maybe a horizontal leadership model. It could also include exploring or starting to implement potential mergers, and that is different from structured partnerships because this is very much about organizations coming together either to be absorbed or to form something completely new. Or it could also be used to explore, organize, and implement organizational wind downs or corporate dissolution. So if an organization is in a position where they may have to either explore or implement closure, there's an opportunity to do so through the CAT grant. In terms of what the fund does not support, so it will not support initiatives for routine strategic planning. So what you're doing has to be a very distinct departure from what you're currently doing. It will not support inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility audits. It will not support capital building projects, and it will not support the development and delivery of artistic programming or ongoing programming or activities. I think the key here is that we're not funding programming through this CAT fund, but rather the substantive change projects that will change the way the organization works and operates. In terms of eligible project costs, so certainly make sure that you're building in reasonable allocation for staff hours spent directly on the project. You can also include professional fees for consultants or specialists or just external expertise that you're bringing in to help support you on the project. And a note on this, while we don't require you to submit quotes for any consultants or specialists hired, you may wish to do your research and collect quotes to ensure that you're creating a budget that reflects market rates, at the time of doing the project. It will also support travel related directly to the project if applicable, as well as venue fees related to the project. This is a new category for this CAT fund, but it'll also support non-fixed equipment and software costs directly related to the project. So for instance, particularly when we're looking at trying to improve or make our operations more efficient, you may be looking into exploring new applications, software, or maybe even tools to increase that efficiency. So those would be eligible. And then also you can factor in up to 15% for general administration and overhead into your project budgets. In terms of costs that are not covered through the CAT fund, so this the CAT fund can't be used to hire new staff positions or newly created roles. It can't be used for severance pay. And again, because we're not supporting any capital builds through this fund, it won't support any capital repairs, upgrades, or building costs. You cannot use the fund to contribute to any endowment funds or debt repayment or servicing. And, pretty standard, any costs incurred prior to the project start date and that extend past the project deadline for completion are also not eligible. In terms of the important dates to keep in mind, so the application process opened on September 16th, and the application process closes on November 8th at 5 p.m. sharp. We're hoping for a very quick turnaround in terms of notifications. So we're aiming to have all of the notification of results out before the end of December 2024. For the project timelines, all projects must start between February 1st, 2025 and April 30th, 2025. For exploration projects, you must complete your project within 6 months of the project start date. And for implementation projects, you must complete them within 12 months of the project start date. Now, there is an exception here. If you're approved for both project phases, so both an exploration and an implementation, you will have up to 20 months to complete your combined exploration and implementation project. So you do get a little bit of a chance to pause in between those two phases, if applicable. In terms of the assessment process, the assessment and decision process is being done by the Work and Culture CAT Fund Review Committee, and our organizations will have the option to request anonymity in their application process. Work and Culture will also have the final say on all eligible expenses. The projects will be measured using a scoring rubric according to organization goals. So, whether or not it's clear that the work will help the organization achieve a very clear and impactful transformation to the way that they're working with their operations. There'll also be assessment against the project plan. So whether or not the applicant has laid out a very clear and reasonable plan for the project, the timeline, and goals. There'll also be assessment applied to the budget and whether or not it is reasonable and appropriate for what the project aims to achieve. And also assessment criteria applied to the learning and evaluation. So whether or not the applicant has considered and outlined how they plan to learn from and assess the success of the project. And then in addition, we're considering the following for the final selection of the CAT Fund recipients. So especially now that the fund is open to Ontario-wide, we'll make sure that a range of Ontario regions are represented, including rural, remote, and northern communities, as well as a range of types of organizations and disciplines represented. To apply, you can visit the CAT Fund page. The link is here. And of course, you can also find it through our website off the homepage. There is a link to the online form that you can fill out directly. You can also download a copy of the application questions in advance to review and prep, always something that I enjoy doing. And then you just have to make sure that you're filling out the online form and submitting it ahead of the deadline. In terms of the application details, so we're looking for, of course, the eligibility criteria. In terms of other uploads, one thing that we have changed for this round is in terms of financial information provided. If you're an organization, you may already have things like audited statements, but if you don't, especially if you're a collective, you can also provide signed financial statements, something that's been prepared by by an accountant or a bookkeeper, a formalized review, or even a review engagement, if you're not quite at the stage yet where you do have audited statements. And you have to make sure that you have governance approval. So that's either board or whatever other governing party or membership provides oversight for the organization. For the project documentation, we're looking for details about the project objectives, the learning and evaluation expectations, the project contributors. So that could be the organization staff involved, or even professional services contracted, or partners that you're looking for support on for this project. We're also looking for your project plan and timelines and project budgets. So important to note there that if you are applying for both phases, both explore and implement, it just has to be very clear to us where that breakdown is between those two projects and those two budgets. And then for mergers and structured partnerships, if you're applying under that theme, we need proof of a collaborative agreement. So a letter of support from all the partners involved, reinforcing what is going to be done. And then if you feel like there's anything else that might be helpful to make the case for your proposal, you can upload other support materials directly into the form. Okay. And then, and in terms of other resources that you can use in terms of helping prep your application, we do have a playlist of previous CAT fund recipients, and you can watch those videos and learn a bit more about what they did through the previous CAT round. There's a series of 5 or 6 videos there, and they're very short, and they detail what they either explored or implemented through their project. And again, if you do have additional questions that aren't answered by the guidelines or this info session, you can be in touch with us. Just to note that, again, because we have received a high volume of interest in this fund, we may not be able to schedule any more one-on-one meetings, but certainly we're going to be trying our best to make sure that we respond to as many emails as possible. And with that note, that concludes the information portion of the call. So I'm going to stop recording, and then we'll open things up to general questions.